How's everyone doing this afternoon? Good. Enjoy a good lunch? Good, awesome. So today we're going to be talking about building docs-like code, continuous integration for documentation. So who am I? I'm Mason Egger. I'm a developer advocate at DigitalOcean. I just started on Tuesday, so if you have questions, I can happily say I don't know. I'm learning, I'm getting through all of that, but it's been a wild ride so far. This is my first time to the city, and I had to come for onboarding, so it's been an experience. Ask me how I feel about New York taxi drivers after this. By the way, mine got pulled over in 30 seconds after leaving the airport. It was great. I feel like I'm getting the experience. I'm going to stop those jokes there. So I'm a volunteer educator with Teals. Teals is a Microsoft philanthropy that works to put computer science into high school programs. If you want to talk with me about that, definitely come up and talk with me about that after the talk. I could do a whole talk on that, but don't have time for that today. And I am a documentation fanatic. You ask anybody that I've worked for, bad docs usually elicit a very rather quippy response from me. So, who is this talk for? This talk is for pretty much everyone. If you're an open source maintainer, if you're a junior developer, a senior developer, data scientist, program, project, or community managers, DevOps engineers, the list goes on and on. This, really and truly, this talk is for anyone who wants to write, maintain, or manage a product that they intend to share with somebody else outside of themselves. So let's go ahead and talk about how we manage documentation. So, it's kind of like the tale as old as time. The common approach for this is a developer writes code. A developer then will commit some code. Code reviews happen, and then we go through automated testing, integration testing, unit tests, all of that. We get to a release process. We have to say, hey, is this product ready for release? If we say no, the developer rejoices because they get to go back to doing what they love the most, which is writing code. If we say yes, the developer swears internally because now somebody has to go write some docs because we haven't been doing it the whole time. Okay? And that someone could be a developer, that someone could be a technical writer, it could be a different developer on your team, it could be the new hire, it could be the intern, you know, this century's go get the coffee is now go write the docs. By the way, if you want to have the worst docs on the face of the planet, have your intern write your docs. It's a great way to get with some amazing stuff. So there's some issues with this approach, with this approach for writing documentation. Documentation is almost an afterthought in this process. We're not really paying attention to, we're not considering the docs as part of our release cycle when in reality it is. Long release cycles can lead to things being forgotten. Now I know that most software engineering shops want to be agile and want to run 2-week sprints and all of that, but in reality that's not how it always works out. My first job, we built a physical appliance that went into data centers, and we had an 8-month release cadence. If you ask me at the end of the 8-month release cadence what I had worked on in the first week of the sprint, I have no idea. And the likelihood of me remembering what I did so I could document it at the end of that release cadence was really, really low. Also, the more layers of separation you have between the implementer of the project or the implementer of the feature and the documentation or the author of the documentation, the more likely you are to have inaccurate docs. And for those of us that, you know, we live in a README engineering culture now where if we can't get it working through the README, you know, we will move on to the next project. You need to have accurate docs because if it doesn't work, I'm going to stop trying your software and I'm going to go find something else that does because there's always 10 to 12 other projects to do exactly what you're doing. The other issue with this process is the developer dislikes documenting, and really and truly, this is what we need to focus on. We need to figure out and ask ourselves, why do developers dislike documenting their code? I mean, it really doesn't make that much sense if you think about it. Developers enjoy writing code, and I've been to a lot of conferences and I've talked with a lot of you. You all love talking about what you're doing and talking about your code. So if you enjoy doing the thing and you enjoy talking about the thing, why can't we enjoy writing about the thing? You know, it seems almost like a no-brainer. And that's because nobody's ever really talked about the real issue. And the real issue is most developers don't dislike writing documentation. They dislike the workflow in which we have to write documentation. You know, I'm writing my code, I'm in Git, I'm in VS Code or something, and I go forward and now I have to write docs. Now I have to switch out of my tooling into a tool that I probably don't like, somebody's internal wiki, some WYSIWYG editor. I have to switch out of the workflow that I know and love into a workflow that I'm not that happy about so that I can write my code. And this context switch makes everybody pretty reluctant to write the docs. So this task ends up getting pushed off. Okay, I'm not going to do it, with this commit. I'm going to do it at the end of this ticket. Okay, I'm not going to do it at the end of this ticket, but I'll do it at the end of this sprint. Okay, well, we're not going to do it at the end of this sprint. We're going to wait till we get to a release, and then I'm going to write the docs. And it just keeps getting pushed down and down the road until eventually the docs just fall off the edge, and then you don't have documented stuff. And this happens a lot. So the question we need to ask is, how can we integrate the documentation process into a workflow that developers already know and developers already enjoy? So what if we treat our documentation like code? What if instead of having our docs external to code, it lives alongside of it in the same repository? Like why is code why are docs in a different place? If it's part of the release process, it should be in the same place as the code. Why not use a markup language that almost every developer seems to inherently know or takes 5 minutes to learn, instead of making them use some WYSIWYG with a toolbar or a ribbon up top that everyone's different and nobody's the same, and if you highlight half of this, now this is bolded and that's not what I wanted, my bullets are over there, and it just like, what? Why am I doing this? This hurts so much. Why are we doing all this? Why are we using all this? So what do I mean if I say, let's treat our docs like code? So let's store our docs in our version control system. Documentation, like code, should be versioned. You should have versions of your code, because I imagine that you have added or removed features or you have fixed bugs, and some of this stuff needs to be versioned, and if it's not, then you don't really ever know when your docs align up with your code, and are these the right docs? And that's really painful for developers. We need to be building our documentation artifacts automatically. Every time we do a PR or we do a merge request, we should be generating the docs. If I'm generating a wheel or a PyPI package every time, then at the same time I should also be generating either, like if it's an HTML website or if it's a PDF or if you're going to tar it up and ship it that way, that's totally fine. But we should be generating a versioned artifact every time. We should ensure that a trusted set of reviewers meticulously review the docs. The documentation has to be reviewed with as much granularity as we do code, because really and truly, if your code does one thing and the docs say it does the other and you ship it to the customers, what do you think is going to happen? People don't go read the code, especially if you're writing proprietary software where they don't have the access to read the code. Also, docs should be tested fully for both accuracy and functionality. So accuracy in docs means, did what you say it does actually happen? And functionality is, if I have a hyperlink to something, does it actually hyperlink there, or does it 404? Because if you're in the middle of a doc and you're trying to read something, and I click and okay, follow these instructions here, click, and I get to a 404, that ends my entire process trying to use your product, because it doesn't go anywhere useful. So you should publish the artifacts without much human intervention. You should hopefully have some sort of automated process to where these can be published. Read the docs is a great place. GitHub pages is a great place. GitLab pages is a great place. There are plenty of free hosting sites that you can use for your project, especially since most of your projects are in GitHub or GitLab, and even Bitbucket. They all have pages of some sort. It can be hosted right alongside of it. So what do we gain if we do this? I'm up here talking about this, but what do we gain if we actually do this? Well, this promotes collaboration. The same way that we use GitHub and GitLab for collaboration amongst code, now we can have collaboration amongst developers. It allows you to track your documentation bugs as mistakes, or documentation mistakes as bugs, and this is exactly how you should be treating documentation mistakes. I originally started off when I was in college in the BSD community, and the open BSD community actively treats bugs in documentation as nothing less than a P2 or a critical bug, because nobody knows how to use it, and it's completely useless. The feature that you have implemented is useless if the documentation is incorrect, because nobody can use it without reading the source code. This allows you to include docs in your code review. We now have gotten accustomed to the fact that if I'm going to see a PR, I want to see a unit test. If I had a feature, we should add a unit test. Well, now we need to get into the mindset of PR, unit test, docs update, and that needs to be part of the entire process. So now we can use this for the whole process. It allows us to make beautiful and uniform documentation. If you use a documentation generator that just reads in the markdown and generates the docs, not only do you have really pretty docs because somebody has taken the time to build the HTML pages for this or build all of the templating, but now they're uniform. You don't have to worry about other people having this style over here and this style over here. The docs become similarly uniform, and uniformity is pleasing to the brain, and people will enjoy your docs more if your docs are uniform. It also allows us to leverage developer workflows and tools. We like Git. We like version control. We like, I don't think people think like Jira, but I think people enjoy tickets. had to catch myself in that lie. So, but people enjoy the tools that we've built and all of the processes that we've built around software engineering. There's a lot of time that we've spent in making great software engineering tools that can be applied to things outside of software engineering. Really and truly, we've created a lot of process tools. And if you can take software engineering processes and apply them to many different things, you'd be surprised at how much more people will actually enjoy them. And it empowers the developers to document. Developers don't want to have to switch out, and if it's right there along the code, they're way more likely to use it. And I have a case study about this where I kind of was, when I started my job at Verbo, which was my previous job to DigitalOcean, when this talk was written, I was still working at Verbo, so that's why it's still in the slides. A new team was formed at Home Away Verbo. The names change. It's irritating. Every company I've ever worked for has changed the name on me. I'm really hoping DigitalOcean doesn't do it to me because I'm really tired of it. Every year I've gone to PyCon and I have to scratch out my badge and write my new company on it. And I've gone for 3 years in a row now, and it's getting irritating. So please, DigitalOcean, let's not do that. So a new team was formed to build a new product. Happens all the time. New GitHub org, new members, everything. Like it was a brand new greenfield project. I was on this team. I was added to this team from another part of the company. The first thing I did in this repository is I added a documentation repository for our long-form documentation on what the project is. And throughout the history of this project, these docs were the most up-to-date. In every single sprint retrospective, it started out with, this is what we've changed, and these are the docs that show it, and they're the most well-maintained in the department. Another team that I ended up transferring to after that team's project failed, and we went that way, did the same thing, where we started writing all of our support docs, and we had a giant FAQ of, if this is a problem, do this. We minimized our support burden by about 50% just by having good documentation that was easily searchable and easily indexable, so that people could use it. So you get a lot of benefit out of having good docs, believe it or not, So how do we change that workflow that we talked about earlier? So the developer now writes code and docs. The developer commits the code and the docs at the same time. This reviews, all of these testings and stuff happen in the same process. We build testing processes around our docs. We build review processes around our docs. We ask ourselves, do we want to release? We say no, hooray, we go back to writing code. We say yes, we still say hooray because the artifacts have already been published as part of our CI process, and I no longer have to worry about any of the doc stuff. I can immediately go back to writing code at the same time that I was originally doing, at the same cadence that I was if we said no. I don't have to worry about that anymore, and it's amazing. I think developers really enjoy this. So, some tooling for CI/CD documentation. So first off, let's talk about what CICD actually means, because I know if there's one thing about tech that we do really poorly is we say a lot of anagrams and we assume everybody in the room knows what the anagram means. So CI stands for continuous integration, and it means that our code is continuously tested, integrated with other code changes, and merged. So this is where you would see a lot of your testing parts come in. Unit tests, code reviews, stuff like this. A lot of this can be automated, some of this still has to be manual, but this is what CI means. CD, on the other hand, means continuous deployment. It means that code is continuously deployed with each patch of our entire code base, which means that we will deploy out a version to test every time. With docs, this means that we will maybe have a preview page, and we deploy out preview pages of our stuff every time. That's how we end up doing that. So for docs, CI/CD means building a full artifact of the docs with each patch. So every time we do a merge request or a patch, we build a new version. We are continuously testing the content with each patch. We're running some automated tests to do that. If you use something like Sphinx, you can easily do this, where you can test URLs and stuff. I make fun of Sphinx later in the talk. Hold up, it's coming. It's a great software, but it's insane. Publish automatically with every release. We don't have to worry about a release process, because now whenever I push out my wheel to PyPI or something, my docs are automatically following it. And this allows us to versioning our docs. Versioning our docs is the best thing ever. You really should be versioning your docs. So, quick aside, types of documentation that we can do this with is we can do long-form documentation. This is the type of docs that developers typically don't think about that much. These are your user guides, your getting started, your FAQs, stuff like that. Most of the time, whenever people think docs for their code, they're thinking functional documentation. You're thinking doc strings in your Python methods and classes. You're thinking Java, JDK testing, JavaDoc, and other SDK stuff. Maybe if you're doing a RESTful API, you're maybe using something called Swagger. So that's the kind of thing that a lot of developers typically tend to think about. They don't usually think about the long-form documentation. Man pages are another one. So some documentation tools that we have at our disposal is we have static site generators. These are good for your long-form documentations, your FAQs, runbooks. Every single runbook on my SRE team back at Verbo was in this kind of documentation. Super easy to search, super easy to find, worked out really well. Stored in code, we could see versions of it whenever we knew we had to upgrade. You know, when we upgraded from a minor version of Nomad to a different version of Nomad, we knew what we had to change and all of that. Or console involved. I worked on a cloud platform team before this. Source code-based documentation generators. These are the ones that most developers, I would say, are more likely to be familiar with. If you're not, totally fine. But documentation lives inside the code. PyDoc, JavaDoc, that kind of stuff. I don't know what the other ones are for the other languages, so I usually just write this. Some even generate testing clients like Swagger, so REST API stuff does Swagger based on the Open API. I think that's what it's still called. Framework, they changed the name on me. Everybody does that. Everybody changes the name on me. System documentation generators. This one is the cute little, this gets a plug in my talk because it's called Ron, and it's a markdown-based man page generator, and the format for markdown is ROF, and Ron is the opposite of ROF, and it's just a really cute name, so it gets a plug in the slide. It has no other purpose other than it makes me giggle, and things that make me giggle make it into my slides. So, yeah. I never said I was sane. Documentation tools. This is a great quote that I had heard one time from Drew Levine. She's one of the core maintainers of the FreeBSD project. I met her at Texas Linux Fest back in like 2016. The more powerful your documentation tool is, the more complex it is. So there are sometimes complexities that come along with it, and it's a nice little graphic to illustrate that while some of them are relatively difficult, some like LaTeX and Sphinx have the learning curve of a brick wall, and you can actually go backwards in Sphinx. I've done it many times. It's a great tool, I love it, but oh, man. So some cool documentation tools we're just gonna talk about today, just to introduce you to a couple. MakeDocs. This is one that I've actually was surprised at how few people have heard about it. I actually love this tool, and all internal documentation at Verbo now is done through MakeDocs, part of the thing that I built. I did not build MakeDocs, I built a pipeline for it. It is markdown-based documentation with a YAML-based config file. I would say the time to hello world is about 30 seconds. It is super intuitive and super easy to use. You just pip install it and off you go to the races. It's easy to configure. It has many extensions and many themes are supported. It's Python based and it uses Jinja 2 for all of its templating, so it's super easy to modify if you need to modify it. If you look at some of my projects on GitHub, they're under a different org, but I'll link to that at the end. You'll see where I've easily just modified it in 20-second modifications. Super awesome. One of the things I really like about it is they've built in a couple of features that allow us to include some JavaScript and like something called superfences, which allows me to do markdown extensions for creating UML diagrams in Markdown. How often do you end up creating a diagram that you put in your docs and that developer leaves the company and it was in their personal Giphy or their personal Google Drive, and now that document is gone, and your options are, well, we can either force the architecture to stay the same because I don't want to rewrite the doc, or I can rewrite the doc and now somebody has to do it. Where's that intern? He can make the diagram, right? Happens a lot. So when it's in Markdown and you just generate it at the time that you build it, you never have to worry about that ever again because now your diagrams are as code. Everything is code. You know, we should make everything as code. Another documentation tool, and the one I told you I'd get to, is Sphinx. Restructured text-based documentation tool with support for Markdown. It's the most common tool for creating, I still, 6 times I've given this talk and I still keep forgetting to edit this slide, for Python SDK documentation form in the code documentation, so many of you have probably used it. It can output to literally any media format you've ever thought of. I'm pretty sure it has a stone and hammer output format, including LaTeX, which is why I think that it's sentient. It might be sentient, we are currently uncertain. I'm pretty sure it's the only Turing complete docs tool there is. But it is insanely powerful, enjoy it. How many people know about doctest in the Python standard library? Okay, cool, it's actually a lot more than normal. Doctest allows you to write REPL-based code in your Python, and then you can actually test the code to make sure the output you gave in your docs is actually what's gonna happen, or actually what comes out, and it will import your libraries and run your code to make sure you're not lying to your users. I have actually had times where the documentation part of the CI process caught things that the unit tests didn't. Which is hilarious. You're like, man, our doctor tested better than the code is. And then once again, Ron gets another plug. Here's what Markdown looks like, and that's what it looks like as a man page. It's a Ruby gem, shh, boo. But It's an amazing tool. So I can't say Ruby at a Python conference, but you should definitely take a look at it. If you like writing man pages, I love man pages personally. As a person who came from an SRE background and a sysadmin background, man pages are my best friend. So time for the demo, woohoo! My issue, I needed to create many open source texts, all with a similar format that are pretty much production ready out of box. I don't want to have to worry about building the texts. They should just appear. And I want a workflow that allows me to jumpstart writers, which this loosely translates to. I've implemented this at every job I've ever gone to, and I got tired of re-implementing it, so I open sourced it. Happens all the time. So my solution was an author will generate some docs, the author writes the docs, author will publish docs, and the docs will be published to a hosted solution. So this is the workflow that I want my developers to experience. So I use Cookie Cutter, which is a Python templating tool for just kind of like Java archetypes. They can template out some code. We use a text editor to write the docs. We git commit push our docs into our repository, and it publishes to GitHub pages through a CICD pipeline. So we just go ahead with the demo, because I don't do live demos. Been there, done that. Maybe one day I'll be brave enough to do it again. So we just run the Cookie Cutter, and it goes, and sometimes I'm really slow with my typing. And I wrote this for when I was doing my PyTexas demo, so the lesson that I learned is never put a conference name in your demo because other people might want to have this talk. And it took me 7 tries to get this demo right, so I wasn't re-recording it. So anyway, we're going to create a PyTexas repository. Again, I don't know why I'm slow at typing in this part. One day I will get better at this. Create my GitHub username. I select a license that I want to use. I select which documentation engine I want to use, Make Docs or Sphinx. We're going to choose Make Docs, and we're going to publish to GitHub pages, and we're going to use Travis CI. I haven't written any other integrations into it yet. So what did I get? Out of this, I get a whole, this is actually the GitHub page with everything in it. So actually, no, that's the Cookie Cutter page. So I get my license file, I get a Docker file, I get a make file, a pip file for my Python dependencies, a README, and I get a docs directory. It comes pre-built with all of this boilerplate. Basically, I figured out how all the extensions work and made them work, and then I was like, I'm never taking them out. So there's a lot of junk in there. So that's the actual PyTexas demo page. So it's a markdown page. So how can I use this locally? You have to lock your pip file. I still haven't fixed that bug, because if you forget to do it beforehand, it explodes. Locks, and then we make build. If you're not doing this in a Linux or Mac environment where you don't have make, the make file is literally just, I don't want to keep typing these Docker commands. And actually, really and truly, you don't even need the Docker commands. You could do this all with a make docs thing. I'm accustomed to putting things in Docker file and make. And then I can do a make run, which will just host my site on localhost 8080. I'm using the material theme, and now I just automatically have a static site that I have with all of my stuff. I can go back into this file and I can add some more text. PyTexas is awesome. I run it again. I come back over here. Comes up again. Relatively easy, relatively straightforward to use. What am I doing next? Aha, now this is me just using it live, where I'm going to open up Biobu, which is just a fancy Tmux wrapper, or I'm just going to leave the server running and I can live edit the code, and it will just constantly update the web page as I do it every time I save it. So that's really useful if you don't want to constantly having to close out, go check it. You can easily leave the make docs process running, and it will remap everything in there. It's awesome. This is where I forget that if you don't put 2 spaces or an empty line after things in Markdown, they wind up on the same line. I have to relive my mistakes every time I give this presentation. It's really fun. I go through a setup for the demo, set up the Git repository, push it up. Don't you wish your CI was as fast as mine? When you control the flow of the video, it's really nice. So then we're going to open up Travis. I push it to Travis. It's automatically going to come with a Travis .travis YAML. So it's going to go through, and again, my CI is faster than yours because I control the speed of the video. And it's going to fail because I forgot to do something. And I always forget to do this, and after 7 times of failing this in my own personal demo, I was like, well, we're just going to talk about this in the presentation. There's a GitHub token that you have to create and put in as an environment variable in your Travis, so remember to do that. So that way you can publish back up to GitHub pages. Go back over to GitHub, developer settings, I can create a new token. For those of you with quick cameras, this token's already deleted, so you're not going to get anything from it. So like, Oh no, there it is. Don't take my token. You copy that token, bring it over into Travis, or any CI. Like I was just using Travis at the time. Any CI will work. You'll just have to learn how that particular CI works. Add my environment variable. And goes through. And it shows up, and I can't really see it, but it showed up in my, it's at the URL up at the top is my GitHub repo. So when we're going to do it one more time just to show that it is a fully continuous process. And we just go one more time through it, and it's going to rebuild, it's going to recommit. And then we wait a little bit. Sometimes if you do this and it doesn't update automatically, sometimes GitHub does take a little bit of time. So that was we now have a fully automated docs process that I just push to my Git repo to use. So that is the demo. Thank you. Thank you. My personal blog site, which is where these slides will be hosted at the end, has a very similar process, but I use Hugo, and it does it builds my website, publishes the tarball as a release process to my GitHub, which then triggers a Git hook that goes to my server, which downloads the thing and reloads my web server, and it's completely automated. Where that's become very useful is I can edit these from like the GitHub UI. Maybe I see I have a really bad typo and I'm sitting in the airport, and I can open up my laptop and I don't need any of my developer tools. I can go into github.com, edit it in there, commit it, and then I know that within like 3 minutes it's going to be updated on my personal website. So can you try this part for yourself? Absolutely. This is completely open sourced, or that entire pipeline that we just demoed is completely open sourced. Unlocked EDU is a pet project of mine that gets attention every now and then. For building open educational resources, if you've ever had to teach computer science A, you'll realize that I wasn't a big fan of some of the books, so I'm trying to write my own. My little brother and I are writing an APCS Java book. And a couple of other things. All books are written in markdown in the MakeDocs format. The cookie cutter project generation template thing will set up an entire pipeline for you, and this is the link to it. Again, you'll be able to find me on my website. I'm mason.dev, very easy to find, which I enjoy. Some good sources for this. A lot of the inspiration and some of the definitions from this talk came from Ann Gentle's Docs Like Code book, which I was turned on to, and it's a really good book. If you want to know about a lot more in-depth process, or if this is a great book to use. This also goes over the entire way to do this in Jenkins, which is really useful because sometimes the way that Jenkins does Git clones and Git checkouts can be a little bit, doing shallow copies and changing branches can cause an issue. So this will definitely walk you through that, which is really good. Ask me how I know that. So, final thoughts. Every job I've ever implemented this workflow at, the developer experience and user docs have greatly improved. Stop making your docs a punishment. Documentation is not a punishment. It never really should be. The docs are actually one of the most important parts of your project, and you really should treat them as such because, and this goes to my next point, if your docs suck, people will abandon your project. I mentioned it earlier that we really do live in a README engineering style culture where there's 40 libraries that do the exact same thing, and if I can't get up and running within like the first 5 minutes that it takes in your README, I'm going to start looking for other projects that do work. So just make sure your docs are good because you want to make sure, if you want people to be good to come to your project and to use your project, you have to enable them. You have to enable your developers. You have to be an advocate for them. This is kind of like my little take on the end of the Zen of Python where namespaces are great. Versioning docs is great. We should do a lot more of that. All docs should be versioned. It can cause, if you're curious, I have a story that I can tell after this where mismatched versioning docs caused a massive security vulnerability in one of the products that I was responsible for, one of my very first jobs. So it's an interesting story. The slides are available on my website, masonegger.com. I also have mason.dev, if you can't remember my last name. They're pretty cool. I actually need to upload this version because I think the ones that are on my website are the first version of the docs of this talk. And like I said, I've given this talk 6 times and it keeps changing. I can't not leave things alone. So I think we have about a couple minutes left, maybe about 1 minute left. So I will take questions in the hall unless, how much time do we have left? Are we good? We have 2 minutes left. I probably have time for like 1 or 2 questions. Okay, who wants to run a microphone? Thank you very much.
Next question.
And I'm loud. I have a theater background, so I can easily talk over this. That's why I have to hold the mic out here. We'll stream it myself.
Can you talk about GitHub READMEs at all? Are they an anti-pattern? Do you think it's a perfectly fine location?
These are a great place to start, but I've seen way too many projects that have about the length of a Harry Potter novel inside of their GitHub README, and at that point, it's not really the useful. The thing that the MakeDocs project gets you that GitHub READMEs do not is that the GitHub READMEs have, the MakeDocs project has a very good search function and the ability to I don't have any on, otherwise I'd pull one up. It's really good search, and you get a lot more formatting with it, and you get some prettier docs. So READMEs are great. You should definitely have them. And READMEs can have like a FAQ, let's get started, maybe a TLDR, which should be mirrored in your regular docs, but should not be your primary form of documentation at this point. If that is what you're doing, hey, I'd rather some docs than no docs. Okay, we're always about some docs. Okay, I think that was all I have. So thank you very much.